Hello. I came across this article. Uh, Ofcom sets out new rules to force tech companies to protect children online. And I thought it was a bit ludicrous. I'm going to explain why. But first, let me just outline my background so I can give you some explanation as to why I think it's ludicrous. Um, Obviously, I've spent at least the last decade, maybe more, building websites, building software, studying computer science, hacking. Not always in the best way, but I've done it nonetheless. I actually started out my adventures in hacking Bebo, which was a social networking platform way back when MSN was still around. Not this MSN, the Messenger. And, back in those days, all the traffic was sent unencrypted. So you could, literally read the traffic that was being sent and, get people's passwords and things like that. So very easy to hack. And Facebook did the same for a while until they switched to encrypted traffic. So you could literally sit in, places like Costa. People were on public Wi-Fi, and scan the traffic that was being sent on the network, and get the usernames, get the passwords. There was an app that was around at the time. I think it was called Firesheep. And you could use that to scan the traffic and one click into people's accounts. So, when I'm approaching this and any legislation that claims to protect children, I ask, well, how are people going to circumvent that? How are people going to not comply? Because inevitably, people are not going to comply, and I know that firsthand because, again, I've been through the family courts, and I've seen how even solicitors advise people not to comply with orders legally, and it gets much worse when you're telling people what they can and can't say on the internet and what is and isn't harmful, because it's a broad stroke, and people are very, very different. Okay? So, what I find offensive and what I find harmful is going to be very different to what you find offensive and what you find harmful, especially when it comes to children. And that's the whole children thing is a complete red herring. So, they say it's to protect children, but actually, I think it's to, clamp down on what's shared on social media, because the definition of lawful yet harmful is very, very broad, and they can change it to whatever they want, whenever they want. But let's just scroll through this article, because there are several comments to be made. So the regulator, which is Ofcom, has published its final version of the Children's Code under the Online Safety Act, setting out what sites must do to follow the law and protect children online. Well, there's a grand assumption there, isn't there, that these sites are going to be based in the UK, and that children can't protect themselves online. Maybe if these children are under 13 or under 12, they can't protect themselves. But, when I was that age, I was, hacking. I was into forums. I was, calling people names over the internet. I was trolling. I was memeing. I was playing games with friends online. I was writing code. So to say that children are in need of protection is a bit, ridiculous because they actively partake. And then there's this idea that sites must follow the law. Well, okay, but this applies to UK entities. So if you feed in, if you have a presence in the UK, then you got to follow it. But the internet's a global phenomenon. So let's say I decide, okay, I'm going to host a site in America, or I'm going to host it in India. You know, it becomes very, very difficult in that event to track me down. Maybe not in America, but you know, if I'm hosting it in a different part of the world, if I don't comply with this, what is the regulator, i.e. Ofcom, really going to do? You know, there's nothing they can do. And then we get back to protecting children online. Well, children know how to use a VPN. They're very tech savvy. So if they really want to get to the service I'm providing, they're going to access it anyway. That's how the internet works. It was built as a means of, you know, getting to a destination in the event of a nuclear catastrophe. You know, if one or multiple nodes go down in the event of an attack, then the traffic is rerouted. And that's, you know, a million times worse now because the connections that we have all over the world can be routed via, you know, endless amounts of nodes. So, you know, let's just have a look at what precisely they're saying. They're saying, under the code, any site which hosts pornography or content which encourages self-harm, suicide or eating disorders must have robust age verification tools in place in order to protect children from accessing that content. So, again, children are being put in front of what is collecting, you know, your face, your facial recognition. So, putting a face to what content is being accessed, ID, or credit cards. So, if you want to access porn, or you want to, you know, research self-harm or suicide, for potentially, you know, innocent reasons, you're going to have to put your ID or your credit card, or, you know, have your face verified against what you're doing. The only places that do this, otherwise, are places like China and Russia. Places that have excessive surveillance. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, we have excessive surveillance in the West as well, but that was ruled illegal. You know, when the NSA and GCHQ were using programs like PRISM to surveil entire populations, and they got found out doing that, you know, they were taken to court and it was ruled illegal. So this whole idea that tools are being used to get facial ages, linking ID, and linking credit cards to verify age, is, you know, and it's somehow going to protect children, is just complete nonsense, utter and complete nonsense. Because all that will happen is people will start using a VPN and they'll access content via other ways. So then it carries on and it says, In addition, platforms will be required to configure their algorithms to filter out harmful content from children's feeds and recommendations, ensuring they are not sent down a rabbit hole of harmful content. Okay, fine, but you can do that anyway. You can already hide content. You can already not access certain subreddits. You can already block them. So it's not an addition. That functionality is already there. And it's been there for some time. So again, that's another red herring. Platforms will also be required to give children more control over their online experience, including indicating what content they don't like, as well as robust controls to block connection requests, comments, and other controls. Again, that's already there, and it has been for some time. In total, the code set out 40 practical measures firms must meet by July in order to fulfill their duties under the Online Safety Act. 40 practical measures. Who, right, if you are developing a new piece of technology or trying to start a business to compete with, American tech or European tech or Chinese tech, who has the time and money, right, to sit there and go through 40 practical measures in compliance? Seriously, right? If you're a small team of two or three people or more, a small, let's say under 10 people, you don't have the time to sit there and go through 40 practical measures in compliance, and you doubtful have the money either. In all honesty, to be doing that. So really all that's happening here is more power is being handed over to the likes of Facebook, to the likes of X and LinkedIn, and other big tech companies that already have lots of money. It's not a win for the UK. It's not a win for British children. It's a win for American tech companies, because they're the only ones that have the money to deal with this. But then we get to this, and this is what I found this really interesting. As well as fines, which can be up to £18 million or 10% of qualifying global revenue, which could reach billions of pounds for the largest firms, Ofcom will also have the power to seek a court order banning access to a site in the UK in the most extreme cases. Well, let's just think about what I've said. If you're a small company trying to compete with, American tech or Chinese tech or European tech, first of all, why would you host in the UK if you've got to go through that additional list of 40 things? Bearing in mind it's already expensive compliance-wise in the UK. And then there's £18 million or 10% of qualifying global revenue if you plan to make money, presumably. I haven't looked if this actually applies to non-profits yet. But it just doesn't make sense to start a business when, this is the type of fine you could be facing. But there's another side to that. If for example, I was to write some software that went, viral, got really popular, and it was hosted somewhere else, well, if I'm not making any money from it, right, and it's just out there, how is Ofcom going to find me? Because if I've got no money and it's not a business, it's just out there, there's no global revenue, and there can't be £18 million, to find me. And even if they ban access to it, even if it's taken down from app stores, it can still be distributed. You know, people will use VPNs to access it. So really, what does this achieve? Not a lot in the grand scheme of things. It just makes the content go more underground. You know, I actually wrote an article a while back for SecJuice, which is a cybersecurity journal, when people were switching from Twitter as it was then. It hadn't actually been bought out by Musk at that point, I don't think. And they were moving to Mastodon. And the issue I had at the time was it's all fair well and good jumping to Mastodon from Twitter, or X as it is now, but these closed gated communities, you know, were harbouring some hardcore paedophile communities, you know, that were dressing themselves up as LGBT. So I wrote an article about it. I said, look, you know, these are the risks of driving people away from Twitter and from Facebook, you know, from centralised open town halls as they essentially are. Excuse me. Because what happens is the town halls get splintered. You get people signing up for things that, you know, they don't actually know what they are. They don't know who they're associating with. It's much harder to monitor, and you know, everything goes underground. It's a bit like priest holes that we had over here in the UK when Catholics were being persecuted, and you know, that got picked up by, as I say, SecJuice, and amazingly, when I raised this with some of the Mastodon index producers. So an index, if you don't know, is basically a list of the communities. They wouldn't remove them. They would not remove the communities that were hosting child abuse and paedophilia. So, you know, you've got to look at the money and the fines, because there's an assumption here that these are going to be legal entities, you know, that can be traced to, you know, a business, where actually, you know, Mastodon wasn't. Anybody could host it, and it could be hosted anywhere, and it can be accessible via any means. You know, you can host Mastodon on a smartphone, you can host it on a Raspberry Pi, it can be hosted on a desktop, or, you know, like, what was it called? The Pirate Bay. The Pirate Bay literally had servers running on a farm in remote France. You know, they were going around distributing servers. So it just, you know, it makes very little sense to me that, you know, there's going to be an entity in all cases, and that, you know, a ban is going to result in these services becoming inaccessible. And then we get to Melanie Dawes. I butchered that, but anyway. These changes are a reset for children online. They will mean safer social media feeds with less harmful and dangerous content, protections from being contacted by strangers, and effective age checks on adult content. Ofcom has been tasked with bringing about a safer generation of children online, and if companies fail to act, they will face enforcement. Yeah, if companies fail to act. So again, you know, there's this there's this assumption there. There's a lot of assumptions being made by these people, um, you know, that have no experience with tech at all. And in some cases, if you go back through Hansard, um, when the online safety bill, as it was then, was being debated, they weren't even keeping their own children in line. They hadn't set up parental controls on the routers. They hadn't set up parental controls on the children's phones. They hadn't set up monitoring. So the reason that their own children were being exposed to harmful content is because they were feckless parents. These are the people that are making legislation, and making the government a surrogate parent overriding parental responsibility, for a reason that seems to be to hand power to American tech firms and stifle innovation, and also at the same time enforce surveillance. So it's less about children and more about power and money grabs, really. Further, growing up in the digital age should mean children can reap the immense benefits of an online world safely, but in recent years, too many young people have been exposed to lawless, poisonous environments online, which we know can lead to real and sometimes fatal consequences. This cannot continue. Well, yeah, that's true, in the sense of, the online world is a bit Wild West, but the alternative is, a sort of 1984-esque environment where everything's monitored, everything is, used against you because you can't be anonymous, and the reality is that humanity is not safe, in the sense of, there are people that think it's funny to shitpost, and there are people that think it's funny when people get the fuck around find out rewards, and there are people that think gore and other types of horrible content is acceptable to watch. And I'm not saying that those should be on the internet, but what I am saying is, it's like a whack-a-mole game. So it's far better to actually, let those people have an underground community that can be infected, and those people sort of rounded up, a bit like 4chan. 4chan recently was exposed as a bit of a CIA/FBI operation, wasn't it? So, when you take that context and you apply it to other underground communities, that seems to me to be a much more appropriate action to take, rather than enforcing this sort of draconian nonsense on the rest of the internet. Anyway, a lot more sort of blowing smoke up their own bums, really, with this stuff, and this is what these people do. The Mandarins, they're there to make this thing look like it's going to work, and inevitably it's not going to, because there's no experience with tech or with people that are technically savvy. Ian Russell, now chairman of the Molly Rose Foundation, set up in his daughter's name after she chose to end her life age 14 after viewing harmful content on social media. Which, again, that's awful, but these are red herrings. If she's age 14 and viewing harmful content, the question that should be asked is, you know, why were there no parental controls, and if there were, how did she bypass them? Because 10 to a nods, if there were no parental controls and she was using a VPN to bypass those parental controls, there was something else going on in that family that made her watch that content and feel suicidal. So, you know, this is less about children being exposed to the content rather than what's going on in that family. You know, so you know, as I keep saying, this is not going to work, and people need to think about this, because it's not about making children safer. It actually gives away your parental rights and your parental responsibilities, and it gives American tech firms more power because there's less choice in social media platform and ways to communicate, and the government are basically toothless. Ofcom can't do anything. Ofcom doesn't really understand the internet. It's used to regulating radio stations and TV platforms, that have always been based in the UK. Have always had to have a physical presence in the UK and had a restricted area. So to say that Ofcom can then suddenly regulate an internet that's globally managed is ambitious, and that's an understatement. It just it's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to go and drink my cup of tea, and I've got some software to write, and no doubt I'm going to have to find a way to block underage people signing up, because this software will actually be based in the UK, and this kind of stuff does not make it easy to build or run software in the UK, because it gets expensive. But there we are. So I'm going to go and drink my cup of tea, and then I'm going to crack on. Thank you for watching.